Duel by Dawn. It was said by Cornelius Caparison, the chief orator of the Dawnlight Conservatory, that the so-called fiend of Mephistopheles descended from the sky, riding a bolt of lighting, shrouded in nothing but brilliant flame. Chester Wixworth, a well-read and respected historian of Dibble University, believed her to have burrowed up from the deepest pit of hell, leaving an eternal fiery scar which still burns to this day. And Chiffy Sourbottom, a malfortuned halfling shopkeep in Sheffield who found his death at the bottom of a bottle, told a drinking man's tale about a thief, a lance, and a lion. And all the educated men who ever heard his tale disregarded it immediately for the drunken, farcical nonsense that it was, never thinking of it again. Schluck. The sound of a freshly opened stomach pouring its contents onto the cobblestone pathway. Shunk. The sound of steel ricocheting off steel, spewing sparks with a clash and riposte. Full boosh! The sound of a great ball of fire detonating with a bright flash, lighting up the darkened night sky. Here in the middle of the small town of Soddenfell stood a fiendish woman with scarlet skin and raven black hair. Had anyone not known who she was, or what she was here to do, they would have surely screamed in terror. And indeed, Matilda Thornborough, the wife of Soddenfell's most esteemed blacksmith, did scream in terror. For despite knowing both who the woman was and what she was here to do, she simply could not hold back the terror which had bubbled over and out. 14 dead highwaymen, slashed, bludgeoned, and charred to a crisp. And Matilda had seen it all. The fiendish woman who now was rifling through the belongings of the men she had just slaughtered, danced her way through the middle of town. Her thin blade sang a song of death as it willered from one slash to another, dancing with a riposte into a pirouette. Quiet now, Matilda. The screeching woman's husband, the venerable blacksmith, known only as Knox, put his hand on her shoulder, urging her to cease her ear-piercing shrills. And the woman did stop, her loud vocalizations replaced by equally loud heaving as she attempted to steal back the breath she had been so loudly giving away just moments ago. You've done it. A middle-aged dwarvish man rushed out through the viscera, having to stop halfway through to wipe a chunk of smoking intestine from his shoe. You've really done it. I didn't know there was a man alive that could incur that much carnage. Or a woman, if you mind me, the man said, holding his hat in both hands politely. The magistrate, fetch him, won't you? The woman's voice struck strangely against the dwarf's ears, her throaty accent seemingly at odds with the image in front of him. Definitely Northfolk, the dwarvish man thought to himself. Ain't no man's or woman's from down past the Yortier speak their words quite like that. Oh, but of course, me fine lady, I'll run o'er to 'em fast as I can. The dwarvish man strode away, his surprisingly hefty footsteps fading into the pitter-patter of a fresh spring rain. You there, boy? The woman spat a glob of blood out to the side. Yes, ma'am? The boy, no older than 9, with a mop of curly brown hair, answered tentatively. Have you a healer in this town? A druid, perhaps? Or a man of the cloth? No, ma'am, the lockjaws went and took them kind first. Pa says they's came and took the priest's old head 'fore he could say a word. The woman was silent, her lips curling downwards into a disappointed pout, before she shooed the boy away with the fingers in her right hand, as her left hand pressed firmly against her forehead, attempting to massage away a lingering pain. The woman looked up again after a moment, sensing the boy had not moved. Can I help you, boy? Or are you just staring 'cause you've never seen a woman with red skin before? The boy squirmed for a moment, attempting to tap into the endless font of courage such young children can sometimes possess. You're her, aren't you? The one they call Zaruil's dog? The woman slouched down, allowing her legs to give way and plant herself roughly onto the ground, her back against the town's well, which was now blown into indiscernible bits. I've certainly heard that name before. The boy's eyes lit up with excitement. Is it true? That you're a devil sent to claim damned souls which have escaped from hell? My PA says, not true at all. The woman let out a heavy sigh before continuing. I don't know where you people come up with your gobshite ideas about me, but I'm certainly no ordained emissary from hell. Though, her red fingers grasped an opaque glass bottle from her waistline, lifting it to her blackened lips and allowing her mouth to fill with the uncomely taste of whichever fermented grains and fruits she had drunk over the past week. I'm certainly willing to cull a few sinners for the right amount of coin. As if on cue, the stout dwarvish man came rushing up the street once again, this time in step with an older man with pale green skin and grisly tusks erecting from his bottom lip. The woman's yellow eyes squinted disapproval towards the man, although the darkness and rain had hidden it from everyone but the boy next to her. She stood, her leather boots caked in mud and blood squishing with every step as the two met. My coin. Her velvety black lips parted slightly as she gently bit down on her bottom lip as if sucking on an old sore. The charge called for Calloway to be living. The half-orc magistrate pointed to a dismembered body cut nearly in half from collarbone to abdomen. And I don't see that poor bastard drawing many more breaths. The magistrate scoffed dryly, his eyes tracing the woman's outline intently. The charge also called for 13 dead lockjaws. I'm no statesman, but I'm certain you'll find that. Her fingers gestured towards the massacre behind her. Counts up to 13. Dead or alive, but I see your point, fiend blood. Nevertheless, the charge was rather quite specific. The magistrate toyed with the pommel of his sheathed sword, tracing circles around the insignia upon it. We have a way of doing things around here in Soddenfell. A way the lord of these lands is quite fond of. Tell me, do you know what that is? The woman shrugged with disinterest. Killing thugs and cutthroats can't really be done incorrectly, I should think, regardless of Lord Jacobitus's particular proclivities. Perhaps. The magistrate's eyes drifted for a moment. Unless there is among us here another with whom Lord Jacobitus's decrees have been sullied. His gaze straightened and narrowed into the blazing eyes of the woman opposite him. Do you know of any such individual? The woman smiled wryly towards the man, expecting every word that followed. The Lord Jacobitus isn't much fond of witchcraft and the likes, and seeing as you are what you are, and what you've done to these poor thugs and cutthroats, as you called them, I may be inclined to suggest you, the ever-so-famous Hound of Zawel, have justice yet to pay yourself. And how does the Lord feel about his magistrate ignoring criminals within his towns? The woman's words struck harshly against the man, but he gave no show of its effect. If I was capable of dealing with a dozen bandits myself, I wouldn't have enlisted your services in the first place. The magistrate cozied his thumbs away behind his belt, broadening his stance in some attempt to assert his authority. Well, pardon me if you will, but you're not capable of fending off a few measly bandits, then I'd suggest the town appoint a new magistrate. Perhaps one capable of wielding his sword better than he wields his veiled threats. The man stayed resolute in his stature, but his face portrayed a swelling, prideful anger. I'd watch my split tongue if I were you, fiend blood, lest it says something to offend, unintentional or not. Sounds like you've never learned about pots and kettles, magistrate. And whatsoever are you suggesting? The magistrate's words barely escaped his clenched teeth. Well, the woman took a deep breath, poring over her next words with great detail. Was it your mother or your father that shagged the big smelly orc? Anger swelled within the man as he drew his sword and held it aloft towards the woman. You'll still your devil's tongue this instant, lest you plan to lose it. The woman shrugged insouciantly, a subtle smirk cresting the edges of her lips. And how does the Lord feel about murdering an unarmed woman, I wonder? She said, gesturing towards her waist as if to grasp a sword which did not exist. Perhaps if bandits truly are above your skill, defenseless women are a more fitting prey indeed. Armed or not, the magistrate's words dripped with contempt. You've practiced witchcraft right here in the middle of town, and there's little more the great Lord Jacobitus despises more than a witch. The man's sword swayed in time with his words, thrusting meaningfully in prose with his accusations. The only witchcraft I see here is that which your orkly mother used upon your father, convincing him to lie a syphilis-ravaged tavern wench. With one last taunt, the magistrate could contain his anger no more. Drawing back his arm, he swung in a high circular arc, bringing down the blade with a speed that impressed the woman. That may have even caused the woman worry had she not already prepared for it. She sidestepped the blow, the blade missing her by a fraction of an inch. No point prolonging this, she thought to herself. In one well-practiced motion, the woman's right hand shot downwards, tracing lines of smoke from her fingertips. The smoke coalesced in her grasp, taking the form of some long, thin object protruding from her grasp. In a flash of fire, her hand shot skyward, producing a finely crafted steel blade from the smoke. Clink! The magistrate had taken another swing, which the woman barely parried off to one side. I knew you were a bloody witch! The magistrate lunged forwards once again, aiming the edge of his blade at the woman's unarmored neck. Their swords met with a loud clanking noise, holding together for a moment long enough for the magistrate to see the woman's black lips stretched into a devilish grin. With great effort, the woman pressed against the man's sword, causing both blades to revolve clockwise. As their blades reached the end of the arc, the woman released hers with a forward jolt, sending the magistrate briefly off of his balance. Her left hand raised once again, tracing black smoke into the air. Schlick! She struck down against his collarbone with great impetus, forcing the man to his knees, blood beginning to stream from his freshly opened wound. "Word of advice, magistrate." The woman placed her leather boot firmly against the man's wounded shoulder, the pressure causing the green-skinned man to recoil. "When you're fighting a devil, don't forget to watch for dirty tricks." In one smooth motion, she deftly maneuvered the tip of her blade downwards between the gap where his helm and breastplate met, sinking it deep into his flesh. "Gah!" The magistrate let out a pained breath as the woman twisted her blade 90 degrees, pivoting it with both hands before retracting it sharply. The man's body slumped forward lifelessly, his sword slipping out from his grasp and tumbling along the cobblestone. The woman picked the blade up, inspecting it thoroughly. "Not bad," she muttered to herself, sheathing the sword into an iron ring at her waist, simultaneously letting go of her own sword, which vanished just as it had appeared, in a flash of light and a puff of viscous black smoke.